everyone. Amina here with the Float Small Business Podcast, speaking with operations consultant Kate Ertmann about some common traps she's seen some businesses fall into, but also how we can be thinking about operations and survival in a much more effective way. Thanks so much, Kate.
Yeah, thank you, Amina. I'm really excited to just talk about this existing system that you can use even in crazy times like we're in right now.
So I have to ask, what is that behind you? I see something are at the gates. What is this?
It is, it's actually a banner from the suffrage movement, and it's the whole quote is "The young are at the gates." It's so appropriate for right now, and it's about looking. The young are there, and come on, more than ever right now, right? Young are at the gates. It's suffragette.
Yeah. Why is that important to you specifically?
I would say that whenever I'm doing with my work that I do in operations and working with companies, and I'm usually working with senior executives, and it's just a habit we all have as we get older, of that looking down, and it is down at those that are younger, those who are newer in the business or in the business environment. And we may be like, oh, I remember thinking that and how that wasn't going to work or something of that sort. It's important to me because I think it's dismissed a lot. And I remember being dismissed a lot for some thoughts or reasoning or ideas that I would have at a certain age. And it's just like, no, there's always some good kernels in there that we should be paying attention to.
Absolutely. And I feel like these things are not removed from operations. And how you build, how do you run your business. And I know how passionate you are about numbers and about making intentional decisions. And so how does this all fit the bigger picture? And what is it about operations really that you love so much?
I'm a systems nerd. Many people like order and spreadsheets, a beautiful spreadsheet with lots of tabs in it.
Which not everybody loves.
Okay, maybe not everybody loves.
But that's why it's great to have a partner like you that really does.
It's true.
We need that sometimes.
True. But I love a system, and I especially love, or I'm especially fascinated by systems that are really established and that are established many decades ago, but now you're like, okay, well, I want to see how can we use that system that probably also has a lot of money behind it, but how do we go into that system and say, how do you bring it to the 21st century? Because there's little chips at it now, and maybe it's not the best system for right now, but there's a reason it has worked for so long. So I love going into like the depths of the establishment and saying, okay, great, this has worked here, and here's how we're going to make a new little ladder over here, and here's how we're going to break this down because that is so broken, and reassembling, but still keeping the structure, outside structure in place.
Yeah. Now, Kate, I know that you've prepared some steps, some concrete thoughts for small businesses to be thinking about moving forward in terms of their operations, especially in the climate of COVID-19, but also beyond. But before we get into that, I wanted to ask, what have you seen over the last few weeks and months that you would consider either pitfalls or traps, perhaps, that businesses have maybe fallen into, maybe even subconsciously, they don't even realize it, that have maybe held them back, that we can talk about today, and that we can address through some of the recommendations you have?
Everybody's looking for like this steady balance, like just get things balanced out again, and you feel comfortable. And if there's going to be a systemic change, which it sure looks like not only is needed, but like it's happening whether you're on the boat or not, to go with this new world of business right now, you're gonna have to get uncomfortable. So the pitfall that I would say that I'm seeing is still that people still keep falling into is just wanting to focus on business and the thing they can control. Yeah. And I think it's necessary that we're going back and looking at, okay, what is your customer, and what is your not is your employees, but who are your employees, I guess. And the human part is where people will be like, oh, it's all touchy-feely, but we're humans doing these things. And if the human part isn't like really defined and really clear, and it feels like a waste of time to talk about the humans involved in everything,
Yep.
it's not. So
No.
stop being like, I just need to talk about numbers now. It's like, no, actually, really, really need
Yeah.
to talk about the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether some businesses prefer to focus on the numbers, and then, the human side goes on the back burner. And with other businesses, perhaps it's the reverse, where they're really focused on the human side, but aren't so great at the financial planning. And maybe it's those businesses who are really putting a lot of effort into both. Those are the ones that are better poised to survive and maybe even thrive. And I think this is why I'm so excited to talk to you, because I know you have some really easy steps for people to be thinking about some really concrete things. So it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be this huge overhaul. It's just think about this, and this, and start small, but these things can have a really big effect.
The first step, no matter what, is knowing, and it sounds so just basic, but my God, it makes so much difference, is that mission, and most of all, the core values of your business. At the core of the core values of the way of talking about them is they're not this, they're not mottos, right? They are things that you uphold, especially when it is least convenient to do so. That's the biggest thing. You can check back that way. And also they're customized to who you are, who you want to be, and what you expect from the people involved.
And I think that is a huge point right there, because I think a lot of companies go ahead and they define their mission, their purpose, their vision, their values, and it's one and done. All right, checked off the list. We did it. And even if they did a really great job with it, like you're describing, if you don't go back on a regular basis, every time there's a decision to be made, whether it's a small decision or it's like a really major pivot, the point, in my view, of having these things is not just to do them and say that you did. They're meant to be a tool, a beacon, a filter through which you can pass your decisions. That's how I've been looking at them.
And they are something that lives everywhere. They are in every hire document. They are in every review document. When you're doing someone's review, you should have everything that you're doing ties back to those core values, and they are transparent. You're transparent about it, so you can be held accountable. You being the owner or the executive team, your staff. These are people that you're with more hours in the day, more waking hours in the day than you are with the people you're going to spend the rest of your life with. The people you chose to marry, or that are your family in whatever way you define family. And it's amazing to me when you spend all this time with these with this group of people who you're depending on. You need to be able to hold each other accountable. So it is super important. It's not something you just kind of put on your to-do list. Oh, I got to write those core values. It is like the meat, not like the meat. It is the meat. It is the core of who your company says it is, publicly, as well as what you say in your day-to-day.
I think that's a really important point too, because it's one thing to say something and it's a whole other thing to live it. And so once you have defined, clearly for the whole team what those values are, living them day to day, but representing them in all facets of your business builds trust internally and externally, because now you're not just talking, you're walking the talk. And people, actions speak louder than words. There's a reason that's a cliche.
Exactly.
And so if we're living, if in every single interaction, customers, employees feel these values, regardless of whether they've ever heard them said out loud, you know that you can trust them.
Yeah, and that you can speak up and say, hey, that decision that you just made for whatever reason, boss person, I don't think that matches with what you said about, that's on your list of 4 different core values. That sentence, it doesn't match to that. And if you do this work and you do it authentically, you're not going to be offended. You're going to be like, oh, wow, yeah, I need to go back to that because
Right.
my goodness, if you're not living them, and again, being these are the folks that you're going to be with so many hours in a day,
Mm-hmm.
and the cost of like hiring and hiring and hiring, because again, goes back to finance always,
Sure.
that interviewing and rehiring, not just the labor time, but the cost of having to having like a swinging door of employees going in and out. By establishing and creating this trust, my goodness, if you could have an employee for 5+ years,
Mm-hmm.
think of all the time you've saved as well as the trust you've built
Right.
in having like this really true, just people living their
Right.
core values.
Yeah.
It's just, ugh,
Yeah.
seems
And
so logical to me.
yeah, no, but I think it is because it is. I think it also applies to maybe employees that have been furloughed and bringing them back. Because if
Yeah,
you've been living your values the entire time that they've been employed and they connect with those values, then they're much more likely to be dying to come back when it's
yeah,
time to reopen again
yes,
and
yes.
continue to build on the culture.
Yeah, like they'll understand why they were furloughed in the first place, and they'll understand and they'll trust that they'll be kept up to date, or whatever your core values are establishing. But those core values are like, it's just so interwoven into when they are those things that are truly hard to uphold in difficult times. And those are truly values. They're not just a motto.
Yep.
And that's just the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. So if step one is to
Mm,
evaluate mission, purpose, vision,
yeah.
values, then what is step two for people to be thinking about?
Well, then step two is to evaluate that you have the right humans and the right environment to be able to uphold that mission, that purpose, those values.
Okay.
So you're looking at when you're hiring and you're understanding what the company needs itself to exist within that value system, you will know if what kind of roles you need to have. And when you have certain kinds of roles, that means there's certain responsibilities that go with the roles. So
Right.
we all in the startup world, which I've worked with a ton and is where I come from and where my clients all are for the most part, it's habit to be like, okay, we hit the ground running, and if we fail, we fail, and that's cool, and here we go. And then all of a sudden it's 3 years later, and the CEO is the one that everyone depends on to make sure to empty the garbage on Fridays, because they always have, because they've always been the one that's leading last. And all of a sudden it's not, it was never defined. It was just people just do what they need to do to help the company. And it's
Right.
like, no, you need to like know where the lines are again to be able to hold each other accountable. So
Yes.
so once you have that mission, the purpose, the values in place, then the next thing is figuring out who are the humans, what are the types of humans that you need to have,
Yep.
not just caring with the values, but knowing I need someone who knows this, this, and this to be able to be head of operations. And I need someone to do this if they're going to be head of manufacturing, and
Mm-hmm.
being really clear to define the roles that the company needs, as
Yep.
opposed to that person's really awesome and they have great potential and I just know they're going to be great to work
Right.
with. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no, if that
Yeah.
person gets hit by a bus. I always say, person gets hit by the bus and you have to hire two people to take over all the stuff that they were doing. Yeah, you got to go back and define the role,
Yeah.
what the company needs, not just what you want.
Right. What the company needs goes back to that mission and the values.
Yep.
They
Yep.
help
Yep.
define those needs, and then you can fill those needs with the right humans and the environment and
Correct.
all of those
Correct.
other pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's
Mm-hmm.
great. I love that. Do you have recommendations for businesses that aren't startups, that let's say have been operating for 10 years in a certain
Okay.
way? They found their niche, they
Yeah.
found their workflow, it worked, then
Yeah.
COVID-19 hits, shakes everything up. Are you suggesting they go back to their mission, that they reevaluate their humans and their environment? This is applicable not just to startups.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely applicable to any type of organization. It's applicable to the large, the Fortune 100 companies right now, going back and saying, okay, why did we exist in the first place?
Okay, so all right, we've got our two steps. the mission, the values, etc., then evaluating those other elements like the people and the environment within what the company needs, which has been defined by those things in step 1. Then what? What's step 3?
Then step 3 is like really getting to the meat of the finance. Now you're like, okay, well, how do I make this happen day to day? So it's getting really clear on what are the needs what are the finance needs is the third step. Okay. So what are the finance needs that need to exist to support those humans and that environment? When you're thinking about like finance goals, maybe you put more importance over supporting your community in some financial way. And maybe you're going to put a bigger percentage mark and say, okay, every month we're going to give 5% of our profits to whoever, however you want to define it, as opposed to once every 6 months. It's just figuring out what are the priorities in that finance goals and evaluating, is it how it was before? And it might be. Yeah. But the path to those finance goals are going to be maybe a different path.
Yeah. And once you get to that step 3 of finance, it's not just putting out the fire. That's certainly important if there's a fire to put out. But then it's also about defining, year 1 post-COVID, year 3 post-COVID, or maybe defining is too strong a word because there's so many unknowns. But sometimes I find it helps to just make a list of all the unknowns and make a list of all the things that we might be able to control. And even just doing that, regardless of following through, which let's follow through, but just making a list of those things actually makes you feel like you're in greater control and you can think more clearly and you can be more strategic because of it.
Absolutely. I mean, like having an awareness and, when you write things down, like makes it seem real a lot of times instead of just floating around your head. And when you write it down, you put the words down saying, like, I have to figure this thing out with the finance or taxes. Like we love to be like, oh, those crazy payroll taxes, that's just a percentage on top of what, no, like understand what those things are, and write them down. And by writing down and knowing what it is that you need to be paying attention to, that's with the finance, and knowing the path that you're going on to get to that ultimate finance goal, which might be a revenue goal, whatever it might be, you'll have a better idea, at least, of knowing when you've gone off the track. Because like if you just write the goal and don't write the steps to get to the goal, or like the gates of when you're on marker and that you are on the right path, at least a path to get to that goal, then you have to know when the train goes off the track.
Yeah. So is that it then? Steps 1, 2, 3, or is there a fourth one?
Well, I mean, yes, there's a fourth one, which is like really thinking about the product, the service that you're doing, which of course, most of us, everybody, when you start a business, that's the first thing you're going to think of. Okay. And it always ties back though to, is this product needed? Is this service needed? Is this, it needs to be validated. But when you start having that machine going, a lot of times we kind of are so focused on the machine, we're forgetting the external part of that product. And I don't mean like updating a product or even like updating an experience if it's a service, but like really thinking about the need for that product in the current environment. So
so much has changed. Right?
So after you get that finance and know where you need to be finance wise, it's really going back and revisiting that product or that service.
Yeah. So if I'm to summarize, it's really exploring your mission, purpose, vision, values, and then using that as a beacon for evaluating the people and the environment in order to express those. And that kind of trickles into the financial needs of the company to support the people and the environment, which upholds the vision and the values and all of those things. And then really the last step is thinking about, which for most people is the first step, but maybe actually should be considered in this greater ecosystem, is thinking about the product or the service, how it fits into the greater ecosystem, both internally and externally. Whew. Is that right?
Right. It is right. It is right. And I gotta tell you, there are times when I've worked with folks who they, I mean, we've all been there. I think when we've started a business and then you talk to that CEO who's like, if I had known it was going to be like this, I was going to build this big company. We're going to do this thing that was my dream. And it's like, oh, this is the business side of it. I wouldn't have done this. I want to go back to, you know, being a barista and not be
Yeah.
running the big coffee shop. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to folks who, again, that it's like that really secret they want to tell me of someone who's a CEO, and they're like, I don't like being a CEO, but I have to be the CEO. I'm like, why do you have to be the CEO? They're like, well, this was my vision. This is my company. I founded it. I'm like, that doesn't mean you need to be the CEO. You can hire somebody to be the
Yeah.
CEO, and you can still be, the face of the company, and you can
Sure.
still go out and get clients. You might be great at sales, and you might have so much passion about your product or your service. So yeah, keep doing the parts that you're good at. Like the founder role is, however that's defined in the future of a company, or what the responsibilities are going to go as that founder role grows and that person grows. Like that's the only position or role in a company that I believe can be customized to the person, as opposed to being what does the organization need.
Right.
So it just drives me crazy when someone is adamant that they have to be CEO because they founded the company. I'm like, it's two different kind of like skills and
Yeah.
qualities, and just
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. All of these were great points. Thank you, Kate. I think this is going to be super helpful to people. If people do have questions about this sort of workflow, can they get in touch with you? And are you consulting with
Yep.
small businesses these days?
Yep, I sure am.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Kate.
Cool. Thank you.